All right, so next bit of news here. Marvel Spider-Man 2, they're saying to expect a darker story, and we got a quote here saying, if the first Spider-Man was Star Wars, Spider-Man 2 is going to be Empire Strikes Back, saying it's going to get a little darker. So just from all of that, I mean, I've already been predicting this since Miles came out, but I think Peter is definitely going to die. But like that's just what my thought process is. Obviously, I don't know, like this is
hmm
not a spoiler because it's just a guess. But I definitely think Peter is gonna die, and I think there's gonna be one more Spider-Man game in this Insomniac like sort of trilogy, and it's gonna be just Miles. I think that's how it's gonna go down. It might have some other stuff in there with Venom being a little more tragic or whatever, but that's just my big prediction is that I think Peter's gonna die.
Yeah, and people are speculating that they might adapt even further into Craven's Last Hunt because of this quote saying that it will be a lot darker. And I'm all for it. I mean, Peter wasn't always present within Miles's life within the comics. Like
Yeah.
when Peter died, Miles came in. That's pretty much how the original Ultimate Spider-Man happened. And with the sort of modern adaptations of Miles Morales, more specifically with Into the Spider-Verse, we he literally got to see the original Spider-Man die, and then he has to take over, and then he has these other Spider-Men sort of help him along his journey in becoming his own Spider-Man. And that was like the beauty of that movie in particular. So I think that having this Peter sort of teach Miles everything he needs to know, hopefully before his inevitable death, or if it doesn't happen, we'll see. But I feel like that can happen, and that is definitely a very strong possibility. And I'm all for it. And I'm also very much trusting Insomniac that they know what they're doing. They know how this is going to start and end because it looks like that they've been planting seeds and sort of elements from the Spider-Man mythos all throughout the first game, with like I mean, not to spoil anything, but the ending and how Venom comes into play, and we're not entirely sure who is Venom. We don't know if it's Eddie Brock or another character. So, there's definitely a lot going on within this game already. From I believe the voiceover of Craven that we saw, and then Venom obviously being like the big reveal. So yeah, I mean, the game being a much darker tone, sort of them being like this is gonna be our Empire Strikes Back. I'm all for it.
Yeah, me too. Like, I think it just makes sense for the story to go in a more darker. Usually, that's how like these trilogies go. Like maybe like second one's a little darker, and then the heroes kind of like fail a bit, and then the third game, they wrap it up. And yeah, I mean, I'm hoping Sony can really do a good trilogy here of Spider-Man because I really like the first game story, and Miles' story I thought was also really good as well.
hmm
Maybe not like the best in terms of Spider-Man stuff, but I think it's up there. Um, so yeah, I think they could tell a pretty good story here, and if it's gonna get a little darker, I'm always for that. And yeah, I mean, again, just big prediction. I think Peter's gonna die. I just been saying that forever. It does, usually when Miles is in there, like Peter is like a paradox. Peter can't exist anymore. So,
hmm
yeah, definitely looking forward to see how the story is. I don't know if like Insomniac is gonna do some like weird the own MCU or Wolverine. I don't think so, but that would be kind of cool. But I really don't think they are.
I
But
mean, I believe that they are working on a third game, and it's rumored it's another Marvel project, which is
holy
a
shit.
little crazy. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot going on within that
Rest
studio
in
with
peace, Ratchet
Marvel.
and Clank.
But I also saw some things on Twitter. This is going to be a tangent, but there was a tweet that I saw where someone was arguing that they weren't a huge fan of Insomniac's game story just because, they were sort of saying that, like this is like a much older Peter Parker, this and that. And like he's like a veteran within his career, but like he hasn't faced off with like Goblin or like Gwen Stacy and all of this other stuff. And I just want like I guess your opinion and sort of your take on that, sort of how Insomniac has handled this veteran Spider-Man and not. I guess their argument was that they didn't like fully dive into that and like sort of like fully commit where it's like, oh, he's already faced Green Goblin. Gwen Stacy died. He went through all of this tragedy already because it seems like from like a surface level within the game where it's like, his main bad guy seemed to be the Kingpin, and he's been the one that's been giving Peter the most trouble throughout his career. So, I mean, me personally, I just think that every single adaptation of Spider-Man has been different in some way, shape, or form, whether you like it or not. And a lot of people will point to Tom Holland's Spider-Man as like a bad adaptation. Personally, I think that it's a fine adaptation for what the cards Marvel Studios were dealt with. But I mean, Insomniac's story for Spider-Man thus far has been good, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like every adaptation of Spider-Man is different, and I don't really get like why, like like each Spider-Man is probably gonna face a villain in some different time. And I would say Spider-Man, this Insomniac Spider-Man is a veteran for like just taking down Kingpin like himself, just because that takes like forever, because he's a Kingpin, so it's gonna take a while to take him down. I think he fought Vulture before as well. Um,
Yeah. I mean, like,
but
obviously, like, all of the other villains were sort of, like, sprinkled
yeah,
in there, but, like, I guess instead
I,
of, like, the Green
like the
Goblin,
big
it was,
ones, yeah.
yeah. I guess instead of,
I,
like, the Green Goblin, it was the Kingpin as, like, his main villain, but go on.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, it's just how they like tell it, I guess. Like it doesn't really matter when it's introduced. Like they would probably just want to save those big villains for the actual video games, which makes sense. Like you don't
Hmm.
have to fight those villains to be like a veteran Spider-Man. Like he already fought a bunch of super villains anyway. So yeah, obviously they just want to show him like, oh, he knows what he's doing, but he's still gonna face like maybe like more tragedy for the first time when we see it in the games when he fights like Green Goblin or Venom or Doc Ock or whatever. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
yeah, I don't really get why that's an issue for some people because he's gonna fight different villains at different times. Like, there's only like a few villains maybe each Spider-Man fights like once, like in the beginning, like usually he's like Vulture or whatever, or some C tier villain. But it's like yeah, like those big villains are always gonna be safe for like a bigger moment. So
Yeah, and I definitely agree with your sentiments there because, people on Spider-Man Twitter in particular always have different takes and different opinions, and some of them I'm like, oh, you put Amazing Spider-Man 2 as like your favorite Spider-Man movie,
all
and
right,
like
well
they were
that's why you
not
know to not listen to their opinion.
they were not bullshitting around, and like their opinion on Spider-Man 2 that Sam Raimi movie, I'm like, oh, okay, but that was just sort of that was just something that I wanted to bring up because I thought that it was interesting related to this version of Spider-Man. But we will move on.